There. Hi there. Yes, it's Christmas, and it's a good time because I have no work to do, to kick back and look at the larger perspective on what is holy, what is sacred, what is real, what is active, what is necessary. And I have a guidance, a source here at my shoulder, and asking questions and getting answers that are beginning to make things make sense. I don't know how many of you have gotten into the history of Tartaria and the fact that it was a another empire, not unlike Rome, Greece, um, going back to Mesopotamia, to the Sumerians, to the Anunnaki. Um, yes, Tartaria was take what, three or four. And what I'm hearing is, because I don't know who my respondent is, but I'm not even going to ask. We've been through the apocalypse 4 times now because the empire, which is based on galactic treaties of the Christos founders and the Anu Elohim, is insistent that its El Anu treaty should be the administration of this world. And that El Anu treaty is exceedingly cynical. That El Anu treaty says, and I can quote it in part because I've been talking about this for 5 years now, that there are superior races and there are inferior races, and there must always be a hierarchy that creates top-down rulership. And it is the job of the superior races to administer the inferior races and call the ones that don't fall into thought groups that are deemed worthy. All right. And so the continual predation of intellect upon life itself has created some interesting effects. Okay. I was just looking at a walking tour of London, and my guidance says, London is not 1,000 years old, it's 5,000 years old. And the monuments in London are just as old as the monuments at the Parthenon in Greece and Rome. They're the same age, built at the same time. But the ones in London haven't been knocked down. They've been maintained and restored and upheld. All right, so what we know from the lack of information about Tartaria, and Tartaria was almost a worldwide empire with consistent architecture and epistemology, from New Zealand to Australia to Cambodia to North America to Europe. It was an enormous empire. And it went down because there's a conflict between the empire's ethos and life itself, which has been manifest by the planetary sovereign who is described in the Urantia book in great detail. Yahweh, the planetary sovereign, is an ecologist, a scientist who came here and restored a world that had been destroyed in a collision, that had crashed onto a sheet of ice. And what Yahweh found when he came here at Genesis 1:1 was that everything was black, everything was form and void, no form and no void. And the toroidal energy system for what had been Tiamat was lying on the ice, dead and dark. And so Yahweh, with his scientific knowledge, rebuilt over a 6-day, okay, these are universal days. Okay, they're 3,000, they're thousands of years old. Okay, he rebuilt the ecosystem and allowed it to be repopulated. Now that was, according to Voyagers 2 by Ash'aunaddin, that was the third seeding that took hold here on this crashed world. All right. And that's why we find wreckage under the sea, under the mud, under the sand of civilization. I think there are 15 cities that are near the coast, just under the water, because the flood of Noah's day increased the level of the sea about 100 meters. So all 15 cities were put under 100 meters of water. So the history we have, the evolution of humanity from a simian hominid into Homo sapiens, is pure bullshit. Okay, because hominids, humans with the DNA we have been seeded and reseeded here since the destruction of Lyra 3 times, and we're basically similar DNA to the Lyrans. The Lyrans were angels. We're a little lower than the angels. So we're talking about the same DNA, slightly different from what was in Lyra. And I'm not certain just how long ago the Lyran Wars were, but after the Lyran Wars, there was this El Anu Treaty that states that these superior races should cull and administer the inferior races. And it's just so irrational, because the quote superior races are in their heads. They have no heart. They are heartless technocrats, heartless bureaucrats, okay? Heartless, mean, insensitive people. And they get their positions because they're smart and they can repeat back, okay? And some of them know the difference between what was true and the fables and stories and myths that have been contrived to socialize humanity today into a coherent story in which we all get the same bullshit. We all get the same bullshit. No, London is not 1,000 years old. It's 5,000 years old. And so is Germany. And Russia is even older, because Russia was the recipient of the survivors who had to flee Atlantis. And they were the original Lyran survivors. And that's why the Russian people are so tough. They are tough. They're tough. Okay. That's why in their choral groups, you hear bass voices, men with testosterone at such a level, they have bass voices that you can't even find in the West. Have you ever listened to the Russian Orthodox choirs singing their hymns? It sounds like a different race of singers. All right. Now, the question becomes, because we're so saturated with false history and false doctrine and artificial conflicts, how do we sort our way out of this? And I just saw a marvelous, simple video. And, YouTube is my university now. And it was by a Russian Orthodox old priest. And he said, in essence, despiriting, removing the spirit of the cosmos from the human form and format is what breaks the connection between human life and eternity. Despiriting, the cutting off of the spirit communication, is what reverts mankind to an animal form in which they have no consciousness of the higher realities of spirit. They have no consciousness of the ethic of honesty, the ethic of tell the truth, let your yes mean yes and your no mean no. He was faithful, what is least is faithful also in much. Okay. Jesus Christ taught the ethic of the Lyrans, which had been carried forward by the Essenes and the Sikhs, and the Amish, and the Hutterites, and the Mennonites, and the 12 tribes, and to some extent, okay, the Baha'i. Okay, there are pacific, peaceful, honest philosophies and denominations and groups here, but every time they get preyed upon and destroyed by the imperial ethic that teaches deceit and treachery, which in Islam is called taqiyya, protection rackets, which in Islam is called jizya, and invasive conquest, which is called jihad. Okay, Islam is in conformance with the empire model, and that's why it is allowed by the Galaxy administration to conquer and stomp over Christianity. And that's why it's stomping over Christianity again. It's the tool of the empire to defeat the ethic of the Lyrans, the ethic of the Pacific philosophies on the world. Now, the empire holds that human trafficking, prostitution, vice, gambling, gun running, drug running, body parts marketing, all these very cynical commercial, some of them genocidal movements are perfectly legal if they're legal in law, and that's because they're simply exploiting the natural environment to the extent that commercialism can grow. Commercialism is the god of the empire. And what Yahweh points out in every scripture that he is allowed to, recite in, whether it's the Urantia book or the Oaspi or the Sri Guru Granth Sahib or the stories that talk about the natural, merciful God, that the practices and processes of commercialism as religion can completely destroy a world, just as predation destroyed Lyra so many eons ago. And so here we are, having the same Armageddon that occurred in the 1840s that occurred 2 other times, and we're still fighting the same resistance to a law morality that upholds truth, justice, fairness, honesty, decency. Those values have no place in the New World Order empire, just as they had no place in the previous empires. Can you begin to see the pattern now? Can you see the pattern? We're not allowed to remain honest. Under the empire modality of governance, the only people who lead are the ones who know how to believe one thing and say something else. Double dealing is takia. Double dealing is treachery, deceit. Say one thing, do something else. That is the kind of people who always rule the empire and will always rule the empire. So the empire is always ruled by evil, and the people who are honest and decent are always at the bottom of the pile, working their buns off and wondering why they can't get anywhere. And the legal system is also a rule baiting system, because there are no rights under maritime admiralty, UCC codes, corporate statutes. There are no rights there in any of those domains. The only rights we can assume are the right to die and the right to be subject to evil. That's the rights we have here. And now you see why the spiritual houses, regardless of what their name is or their denomination, they talk about a resistor, they talk about Satan, they talk about evil, they talk about Lucifer, the ones who have brought about the reversion to the empire time after time after time. This is like the fourth Armageddon. That's what my respondent is telling me. And I think those of us who hope for a world that was described in Psalm 37, for the meek themselves shall inherit the earth, and they shall find their exquisite delight in the abundance of peace. That world is still afar off from us, and there still needs to be a judgment day to make that world possible. And I don't know how it will happen, but having had 4 Armageddons in our last 1,000 or 2 years, I don't think that the people who have faith in, believe in, and follow God and Jesus Christ, or whatever prophet they want to follow according to the ethos of decency and honesty, I don't think they have a handle on the magnitude of the problem here. You know, they're hoping that their prayers and their wishes are going to save them. I think we may have to do a little more than that. Okay, so that's the download I got today. I wanted to share it with you, my friends, and thanks for coming by, and I'll see you again when I hear some more. You know, I'm always listening. That's the job of the older generation, to listen for inspiriting, and that's what television, movies, video games, and sports and fashion and all of this wonderful, interesting, fascinating stuff keeps away from us. It does. So we'll keep on keeping on. Thank you, and have a wonderful rest of the Christmas. Okay, bye-bye.